Zach had a corporate sales job in Iowa. Good salary, stable income, the kind of position that looks good on paper, but feels like a grind every single day you show up to it. Now, he is not a unique story in that sense. A lot of people watching this are in exactly the same position, right? The job is just not what they want their life to look like in 10 years. Now, what makes Zach's story worth breaking down is what he did about it and what it actually took. He started this business from literally nothing, right? No cleaning experience, no business entrepreneurial background, nothing but corporate sales, and a decision to run the system and see what happened. And 6 months later, he was doing over $40,000 a month. He now does over $51,000 a month. And a few weeks ago, he actually left the corporate job entirely. I want to walk you through exactly how that happened because the headline numbers are probably the least useful part of this story. What is actually useful is the sequence of decisions Zach made, starting while he was employed, that made the outcome possible. So let's get into it. So Zach came into my program as a corporate sales rep. That context matters more than it might seem up front. And I'll come back to it when we talk about how fast he was able to move on the client acquisition side. But the more important context is where his head was at before he actually made the decision to start. He had a real job. He was making real money. And from the outside, there was nothing obviously wrong with his situation. Lived in an area with a reasonable cost of living. He had a stable salary, clear career path if you wanted it. The issue wasn't the money. The issue was that he did not want to live the life that came with it, right? The corporate grind is not just about the hours or the boss or the commute. It's about looking at the trajectory and realizing that more of the same is not a good enough outcome. More promotions, more years, more of a life that belongs to someone else's company. And that was what Zach was looking at. And it was enough to make him willing to build something on the side while working full time. That starting point is important because it means he didn't have the luxury of going all in from day one, right? He had to build this business in the hours available after the job, right? That wasn't already consuming him. So that constraint is actually what I want people who are in a similar position to pay attention to, because a lot of people will use being employed as a reason to wait. Zach actually flipped it on its head and used it as the context within he was going to execute anyway. So when Zach first started, again, he didn't have any cleaning experience. He had never run a service-based business before. He had never hired a cleaner, priced a job, set up booking software. His starting point was the same starting point as almost everyone who comes into this program, which is knowing nothing specific about this industry and needing to learn the system from scratch. What he did have was the discipline to follow the process in the right order without skipping steps because they might feel slow, especially for a sales rep, right? That sounds like a small thing. And I think most people underestimate how rare that actually is, because the number of clients I've worked with who want to start marketing before their business is set up or who want to get their first clients before they have cleaners is quite high, right? The ones who get the results the fastest are almost always the ones who actually resist that urge, build the foundation first before they try to grow on top of it. So Zach set up his business properly from day one, right? Before he did anything else, right? He had the LLCs, the insurance, the banking, the booking softwares, all the back-end systems, all the templatized things. They're all in place before a single thing was done in terms of hiring or sales. So it might not feel like progress, but to me, it is the exact reason why the next phase actually works so well. From there, he went to the supply side before the demand side, right? So cleaners before clients. He was sourcing through Indeed primarily and some other standard channels. He was running interviews, ran test cleans, and then had reliable cleaners onboarded before he started driving the volume. Now, again, I've mentioned this before, but that sequencing meant that when a client actually calls in about a cleaning, there was actually somebody there to deliver the service, and it wasn't going to be Zach. Now, to me, here's where Zach's specific background became a real advantage, because most people who start this business will struggle with some sort of client acquisition in the first month or two as they start to get used to the sales process. Not because the channels don't work. The channels do work. They just haven't had enough time, because converting an inquiry to like a recurring booking, right, that requires a sales conversation, most people may not have that experience at all. And it's something that they are uncomfortable with, that they need to get more comfortable with over times, over reps and things like that. They might get nervous on the phones, right? They lead with price before they've even built any value or trust. And they don't know how to handle any objections, right, without just discounting immediately. So that friction will slow some early momentum when you're getting on the phones for the first time. Obviously, Zach, coming from corporate sales, he didn't have that friction, right? He already spent his career in that field. He already understood how to run a conversation, how to actually ask the right questions before making the pitch, and then how to position value in a way that made the price feel secondary to the outcome. So when he got on the call with a potential client, he already knew how to close, right? That skill basically got compressed, and his client acquisition timeline just went on a speed run, right? Faster than most clients at the same stage. He was converting inquiries at a rate that built his recurring base extremely fast, which meant his revenue was actually compounding faster, which meant he actually hit $10,000 a month very quickly and then kept climbing without extending the plateau that I see a lot of clients experience in month 2 and 3 when client acquisition can stall. Now, his sales background did not make the business easier across the board, right? The operational side still required the same work everyone else had to do. But on the single most important variable in the early months, like getting recurring clients to say yes, he was operating at a level that most people are going to take a couple years to develop. Now, the moment that I think Zach's trajectory completely changed from a solid cleaning business that he's doing with his W-2 to a real scalable operation was the VA hire. Now, a lot of clients will wait too long to bring in a VA. They tell themselves they will do it once they hit some milestone, right? 10,000 or they hit 20,000, or they feel when things are more stable. What actually happens during that time, or by that time they get around to it, is that they actually already are the bottleneck, right? It's already too late. They're spending too many hours doing little things that are low leverage tasks, right? Scheduling, cleaner communication, client communication, billing, follow-up. Now all the operational tasks have been basically piling up. They are growing, but they are also growing themselves into a second full-time job rather than a business that is operating without them. So Zach recognized that and figured that out early, that getting that person in place, especially the right person, was the decision that would determine whether this was a job or an asset. He invested the time into sourcing properly, onboarding properly, documenting the processes that the VA needed to run, and training them in a way that actually transferred responsibility rather than just delegating tasks while remaining the person who still had to micromanage and oversee every single one. Once that was in place, his time commitment to the business significantly dropped while his revenue actually kept growing. So he was no longer in the day-to-day, right? He was overseeing the operation at a high level, right? Looking at the numbers, making strategic decisions about growth, and not spending hours on low leverage tasks that a well-trained VA could honestly handle better and faster than someone that's splitting their attention between a cleaning business and their corporate sales job. Now, I also want to tell you something about Zach that I think says more about how he runs his company and business than any revenue number is ever going to show you. He actually went to South Africa to visit his VA team in person. Obviously, it was a trip, but he also made an effort to meet them in person. That's not a standard thing people are going to do, right? People are going to get into this remote cleaning business, especially in the States. They're never going to consider going on a plane to meet people who actually run their day-to-day operations, right? They communicate over Slack or WhatsApp. Typically, they're giving feedback through whatever channel they use. And that relationship is going to stay professional, remote, and sometimes it feels like even freelance at times. Zach decided to treat his VA team like what they actually are, which is the people who make his business work, right? He invested in that relationship in the most direct way available by showing up in person. And what that does, beyond whatever immediate impact it had on the relationships themselves, to me, it signaled the kind of business owner he is. Right? He is not someone who views his VA as a cheap freelance outsourced resource, right, that he tolerates. He views them as part of the organization he's genuinely building a future with. And he shows it by the way he treats them. And I tell clients all the time that the cleaner loyalty, the VA loyalty, those are the assets that most cleaning business owners underinvest in, and that the operators who build real staying power in this type of model, especially when you're doing a remote, are the ones who understand that the people in their organization are determining the ceiling in the business. Zach understood that. The South Africa trip is the most visual proof of it. Now, I want to show you Zach's actual numbers from his last month because I think there is a version of a 51K month that sounds impressive, and then you look at the details and it's mostly one-off jobs with thin margins or a chaotic business operation behind it. And Zach's numbers are not that, right? Total revenue for June 2026, 51,291. Of that, 32,500 is recurring revenue. That's 63% of his total clientele who are already booked, already scheduled, and already paying on a recurring cycle without Zach having to reacquire them every single month. He ran 267 total bookings in June. 213 of those were recurring. His revenue per booking was 193. Again, that's a blended number, one time and recurring, right? So sometimes you're going to have higher and lower, but it's going to be around that mark. Now, the recurring base is what makes this a real business and not a hustle, right? One-off bookings are definitely going to generate more revenue, right? But recurring clients generate the revenue every 2 weeks indefinitely, right? Zach has literally 213 recurring bookings every single month as the foundation, okay? And then the one-time bookings stand on top of that, obviously to win deals as well as just get some additional volume. So that structure is what allowed him to leave his corporate job in confidence, because the income is not something he has to rebuild from scratch every single month. He's looking ahead on the future months and saying to himself, all right, I already got this income on the books ready to go. Obviously, I can continue to grow from here, but I already know that I have 30-something thousand dollars in recurring income. So Zach since has left his corporate sales job. Right now, he is a full-time entrepreneur. He's running this business. It's generating over $51,000 a month. He has a team that's handling most of his day-to-day, and his lifestyle looks nothing like he was living when he first started. He works minimal hours per day on the business. He has time leverage back. He has a VA team that he has invested in properly. He's personally visited them across the world. Now he runs his operations with the same standards he built from the beginning. The goal when he started was not to become a cleaning business operator. To me, the goal was to build something that gave him options. The option to leave his job, the option to work on his own terms, the option to have a business that generates income without requiring him to trade all of his time for it. And now he has all of those options now. So the thing I want you to take from his timeline specifically is that 6 months is not a long time. 6 months from starting from literally nothing with no experience, no cleaning background, and a full-time job that was taking his day to a business that's generating over $40,000 a month is a timeline that most people do not believe is real until they're looking at the actual numbers. Right? So this dashboard, these are the actual numbers. The decision Zach made that made everything else possible was not the decision to leave his job, right? That came when he earned financial optionality 6 months later. The decision that actually changed his trajectory was just to start while he was still employed, before conditions were perfect, before he had more time, before he felt ready. He ran the system in order. He used his strengths to close clients with the skills he already had been developing for years. He hired the right team, treated that relationship like it mattered. In 6 months after starting from zero, he had built an operation that made his job optional. So if you want to see the full system Zach went through to get there, I have a full program in the description that covers every step from market selection to your first $10,000 month. And if you are in a position like Zach, still employed, not sure if the timing's right, wondering if this is actually real, his dashboard should be your answer to that question. And I'll see you on the next one. And shout out to Zach for doing such an amazing job on his execution. Proud of you.